A photograph from 1898 shows four children with vacant stares. When enlarging the image, curators discover a sinister figure watching from the shadows, revealing a macabre secret. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss any new videos. It was October 12, 2024. Art conservator Sarah Mitchell was reviewing a recent donation to the Salem Local History Museum in Massachusetts. Among the family antiques donated by the Blackwood family estate, one photograph in particular caught her attention due to its extraordinary preservation. The image, dated on the back as September 1898, showed four children posing formally in front of a Victorian house. The children, apparently between 8 and 12 years old, wore typical clothing of the era, dark suits for the boys and long dresses for the girls. Their expressions were serious, as was common in photographs from the late 19th century. "What a beautiful period piece," murmured Sarah, admiring the sharpness of the image. It was rare to find photographs from 1898 in such good condition. The composition was perfect, with every detail visible even after 126 years. Sarah began cataloguing the image for the museum's collection. While examining the details with a magnifying glass, she noticed something peculiar. The children had a strange expression in their eyes, something she couldn't identify but that deeply disturbed her. It wasn't fear exactly, but a kind of emptiness that didn't seem natural in children of that age. The absence of life in their gazes was disconcerting. Victorian-era children usually showed some reserve in portraits, but this was different. It was as if something essential had been extracted from their souls, leaving only empty shells where childhood innocence should have shone. She decided to scan the photograph in high resolution to preserve it digitally. While the machine processed the image, Sarah felt a strange sense of unease. There was something in that photograph that didn't fit, something her experience as a curator told her she should investigate more deeply. When the scan was ready, Sarah opened the file on her computer and began examining the details more meticulously. When zooming in on the area around the children, she noticed something that left her frozen. In the background of the image, barely visible in a window of the house, a silhouette could be distinguished that seemed to be watching the scene. "That's strange," she whispered, adjusting the contrast to see better. The figure in the window didn't seem to be another family member posing. It had a peculiar posture, as if it were hidden, watching in secret. It was October 14th, 2024. Sarah had spent the weekend investigating the history of the Blackwood family. Genealogical records revealed that the family had been prominent in Salem during the 1890s, but their history contained disturbing gaps she couldn't explain. The house shown in the photograph belonged to Cornelius Blackwood, a wealthy textile industrialist who had made his fortune during the economic expansion of the late 19th century. According to municipal records, Cornelius and his wife Margaret had adopted four children between 1896 and 1898, an unusual practice for the era. The names of the children in the photograph, according to adoption documents, were Thomas, 12 years old, Elizabeth, 10 years old, Samuel, 9 years old, and Mary, 8 years old. But what disturbed Sarah was the speed of the adoptions and the absence of information about the children's origins. "4 adoptions in 2 years, murmured Sarah while reviewing the documents. "That's extraordinarily unusual for 1898. Sarah contacted Dr. Helen Morrison, a historian specializing in New England social history. Helen had extensively studied adoption practices in Massachusetts during the 19th century and knew the protocols of the era. "Sarah, what you're describing is very strange," said Helen after reviewing the information. "In 1898, adoptions were long and strictly regulated processes. A family that adopted 4 children in such a short time would have raised significant suspicions in the community." Sarah sent the digitized photograph to Helen. After examining it carefully, Helen called her with evident urgency in her voice. "Sarah, you need to look more closely at the girls' dresses. That fabric and style aren't typical of clothing for well-off children of the era. They look like institutional uniforms." Sarah enlarged the image, focusing on the clothing. Helen was right. The girls' dresses were identical down to the smallest details. Same cut, same fabric, same buttons. The boys' suits also showed this suspicious uniformity. "Institutional. What type of institution would use uniforms like this?" asked Sarah, though she feared the answer. "Orphanages, asylums, or..." Helen made a significant pause. "Institutions for children with mental problems. In the late 19th century, There were many places where they sent children they considered problematic or deficient. That night, Sarah found a disturbing record in the county archives. Cornelius Blackwood had been listed as the principal benefactor of the Salem Institution for Disturbed Children, a facility that had operated from 1885 to 1902. The institution had been abruptly closed following serious administrative irregularities, but specific details had been sealed in the archives by court order. It was October 16, 2024. Sarah headed to the Essex County Archives, determined to find information about the mysterious Salem Institution for Disturbed Children. The archivist, James Crawford, an older man who had worked there for decades, received her with an expression of curiosity mixed with concern. "The Blackwood Institution," said James when Sarah mentioned the name. "It's been years since anyone asked about that place. The documents are in the sealed archives in the basement, but I can get you temporary access if you really need it." James led her to a dusty basement where the oldest and most sensitive documents were kept. The boxes were marked with dates spanning from 1885 to 1902, the complete period of the institution's operation. "Be careful with what you find," James warned her with a grave voice. There were very specific reasons why that institution was closed so abruptly. Officials of the era preferred to bury the information rather than face the consequences. Sarah opened the archive boxes with trembling hands. The documents revealed a progressively more disturbing story. The Institution for Disturbed Children had been officially founded to treat children with mental imbalances and antisocial behaviors, but internal reports told a completely different story. A medical report from 1897 described in detail experimental treatments applied to children between 6 and 14 years old. The methods included prolonged isolation therapy in containment cells, severe nutritional modification to alter behavior, and psychological conditioning techniques through sensory deprivation. "My God," whispered Sarah, as she read an internal memo dated August 1898. Experiment 247. Subjects show signs of complete docility and absence of resistance after 6 months of intensive treatment. We recommend proceeding immediately with the photographic documentation phase. Sarah found a detailed list of children who had been subjected to these treatments. The names matched exactly those in the photograph. Thomas Whitmore, Elizabeth Hayes, Samuel Porter, and Mary Campbell had been their original surnames before being adopted by the Blackwood family. A document dated September 15, 1898, contained a note that left her frozen. "Subjects have reached the desired state of total compliance and elimination of individual personality. Proceed with documentary photography before proceeding with the final phase of the experiment." Sarah realized with growing horror that the photograph she had found wasn't a family portrait. It was scientific documentation of an experiment. The children had been subjected to some kind of systematic psychological conditioning that had completely eliminated their personality and individual will. A final document left her completely breathless. It was an order signed by Dr. Mordecai Blackwood, Cornelius's brother, dated September 20, 1898. Experiment completed satisfactorily according to established parameters. Proceed immediately with final disposition of subjects to avoid future complications. It was October 18, 2024. Sarah had spent 2 days intensively investigating Dr. Mordecai Blackwood, the man responsible for the experiments. Massachusetts medical records revealed he had been a controversial psychiatrist who had studied experimental techniques in Europe before returning to Salem with radical ideas. In Harvard Medical School archives, Sarah found Blackwood's doctoral thesis dated 1885, Advanced Methods of Psychological Conditioning for Permanent Modification of Aberrant Childhood Behavior. The thesis described detailed techniques for completely reforming children considered problematic through isolation, sensory deprivation, and systematic psychological manipulation. His methods were considered extreme even by the standards of the era, explained Dr. Robert Hayes, medical historian at Harvard, when Sarah contacted him. Blackwood firmly believed he could completely reset a child's personality through controlled psychological trauma and intensive conditioning. Sarah found personal correspondence between Mordecai and his brother Cornelius, which revealed the true nature of their criminal association. Cornelius had provided the necessary financing and respectable facade of social benefactor, while Mordecai conducted the experiments in absolute secrecy. In a letter dated July 3, 1898, Mordecai wrote with scientific enthusiasm, "Dear brother, the current subjects are responding exceptionally well to treatments. We have managed to completely eliminate their previous personalities and emotional connections. They are like completely blank slates, absolutely malleable to our purposes. Sarah felt physical nausea reading Cornelius's enthusiastic response. Excellent progress, brother. Government investors are eager to see concrete results. If we can definitively prove that problematic children can be completely reformed, we'll have guaranteed federal contracts for decades. The investigation revealed that the Blackwood brothers had been developing mind control techniques specifically to sell to the federal government. The children weren't patients needing treatment. They were human test material to perfect brainwashing and psychological control methods. A personal diary of Mordecai, found in family archives, contained disturbing daily entries about the 4 children in the photograph. September 15th, 1898. Thomas no longer responds at all to his original name. Elizabeth has completely lost the ability to cry or show emotional expression. Samuel obeys any command without the slightest questioning. Mary doesn't speak unless specifically ordered. The experiment has been a total and complete success. Sarah realized the photograph had captured the exact moment when these children had been completely stripped of their fundamental humanity. Their vacant eyes weren't a natural expression, but the direct result of months of systematic psychological torture and deliberate dehumanization. It was October 20th, 2024. Sarah had decided to investigate more deeply the mysterious figure she had noticed in the window of the photograph. Using specialized image enhancement software, she managed to progressively clarify the silhouette that appeared in the background of the scene. The figure was definitely human, but its posture was strange and threatening. It seemed to be watching the photographic session from the shadows, as if it didn't want to be seen, but also couldn't resist the temptation to witness what was happening. Sarah enlarged the image as much as technology allowed, and what she saw left her completely breathless. The figure wore what appeared to be a white medical coat, and in its right hand, a large syringe could be clearly distinguished. The figure's position suggested it was waiting patiently, as if the photographic session were a signal to proceed with some final procedure. Sarah contacted Marcus Weber, an internationally recognized expert in forensic analysis of historical images. Marcus had worked on similar cases where old photographs had revealed crucial details about historical events that had been covered up for decades. "Sarah, this is absolutely extraordinary," said Marcus after examining the image with specialized equipment. "The figure is definitely holding a large medical instrument. And look here." He pointed to a part of the image Sarah hadn't noticed previously. "There are other figures in the background barely visible. It seems there were multiple people watching this session." Detailed analysis revealed that at least 3 adult figures were present during the photographic session, all watching from different windows and doors of the house. The session hadn't been a simple family photograph, but some kind of carefully orchestrated and documented procedure. Sarah returned to the archives with this new information and found an absolutely disturbing entry in Mordecai's diary, dated September 16th, 1898. "Tomorrow, we will proceed with the final phase of the experiment. Government investors have arrived from Washington to personally witness the demonstration of our methods. The photograph will serve as documentary evidence of the subject's completely docile state before the definitive terminal procedure." Sarah realized with absolute horror that the photograph had been taken as official documentation for government investors. The children had been exhibited as successful products of an experiment, and the figures in the windows were probably federal officials observing the demonstration of mind control techniques. An additional document confirmed her worst fears. It was a detailed invoice from the local funeral home dated September 22nd, 1898, for 4 child burials, commercial account of Blackwood Institution, emergency procedure. The children had been systematically executed after the photographic session. The image Sarah had found wasn't just evidence of psychological experiments, but the last photograph taken of 4 innocent children before being murdered to completely cover the evidence of the experiment. It was October 22nd, 2024. Sarah had been intensively investigating the government connection mentioned in Blackwood's documents. Archives from the U.S. Department of War from 1898 contained specific references to psychological research projects secretly funded during the Spanish-American War. In the National Archives, Sarah found official correspondence between Secretary of War Russell Alger and a mysterious psychological research consortium based in Massachusetts. The letters revealed that the federal government was secretly funding experiments to develop advanced interrogation and mind control techniques for military use. Traditional methods of obtaining information from enemy prisoners and dissidents have proven completely ineffective, wrote Alger in a classified letter dated August 5, 1898. We urgently need to develop more sophisticated and permanent techniques to guarantee total compliance and elimination of resistance. Sarah discovered that Dr. Mordecai Blackwood had been specifically hired as principal consultant for this ultra-black project. The experiments with children had been deliberately designed to perfect techniques that would later be applied to prisoners of war, enemy spies, and political dissidents. In a report classified as top secret, dated September 10, 1898, Blackwood described with scientific detail the results of his experiments. Child subjects have proven ideal for initial testing. Their natural psychological plasticity allows complete personality modification in relatively short periods. The perfected methods can be applied to adults with slight technical modifications. Sarah felt physical horror, realizing that Thomas, Elizabeth, Samuel, and Mary had been specifically selected because they were orphans without families who could search for them or ask questions. They had been considered completely disposable, human test material to develop psychological weapons. The investigation revealed that high-level Department of War officials had been personally present during the September 16th photographic session. The demonstration had been carefully designed to show the total effectiveness of Blackwood's techniques before approving massive additional funding. An internal Department of War memo dated September 20, 1898, confirmed enthusiastic approval of the project. Dr. Blackwood's demonstration was completely successful. Subjects showed total compliance and absolute absence of resistance or individual personality. We immediately approve additional funding to expand the program to similar facilities in other states. Sarah understood that the 4 children hadn't been the only victims. They had been the prototypes for a much broader program of psychological experimentation that had systematically expanded nationwide. The photograph she had found wasn't just evidence of an isolated crime, but official documentation of the first steps of a massive government mind control program that had begun with the deliberate sacrifice of 4 completely innocent children. It was October 24, 2024. Sarah's investigation had revealed that the Blackwood institution hadn't been an isolated case of cruelty. Declassified government documents showed a systematic network of similar facilities operating secretly throughout the country during the 1890s. In Department of Interior archives, Sarah found an official list of psychological research institutions funded directly by the federal government. There were at least 12 facilities in different states, all operating under the respectable pretense of treating problematic children and the mentally deficient. An Inspector General's report dated 1901 revealed the absolutely chilling magnitude of the program. It is conservatively estimated that approximately 300 child subjects participated in various psychological research projects during the period 1896-1900. The developed methods have been successfully implemented in military operations in the Philippines, Cuba, and other colonies. Sarah felt physical nausea reading this. The experiments hadn't been theoretical or academic. They had been actively used in real wars against defenseless civilian populations. The archives contained photographs from other similar institutions in different states. Sarah immediately recognized the disturbing pattern. Children with the same completely vacant eyes, dressed in identical institutional uniforms, posing for photographs that served as official documentation of experiments. In extensive correspondence between Dr. Blackwood and Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann, director of a similar institution in Pennsylvania, Sarah found chilling technical details. Dear colleague, our refined methods have proven 100% effective in all cases. Subjects can be completely reprogrammed and stripped of individual personality in an average period of 4 to 6 months. We recommend immediately proceeding with massive nationwide expansion of the program. Sarah discovered that the methods developed by Blackwood had been carefully codified in an official Department of War manual. The manual, titled Advanced Techniques of Psychological Modification for Military and Civil Application, had been distributed to intelligence officers and had formed the basis of subsequent programs. Most disturbing was that Sarah found solid documentary evidence that some of the methods had continued being used in different forms for decades. CIA mind control experiments in the 1950s and 1960s showed troubling technical similarities to techniques developed by Blackwood. A document from Dr. Blackwood's personal archive revealed his sinister pride in the permanent legacy of his work. My pioneering experiments with child subjects have provided the solid scientific foundation for the development of psychological warfare techniques that will serve our country for future generations. Sarah realized that Thomas, Elizabeth, Samuel, and Mary hadn't just been victims of an isolated experiment. They had been the first of hundreds of children systematically sacrificed to develop psychological weapons that had been used in military conflicts for more than a century. It was October 26, 2024. Sarah had discovered that the psychological experimentation program had been systematically covered up for more than a century. Documents revealed a massive coordinated effort to eliminate evidence and silence testimonies that could expose the truth. In 1902, when the institutions were officially closed following administrative irregularities, immediate destruction of all archives and photographs related to the experiments was ordered. A Department of War memo dated March 15, 1902, specifically instructed all documents related to psychological research projects must be destroyed immediately. Subject families must not be contacted under any circumstances. Institution employees must sign permanent confidentiality agreements under penalty of treason. Sarah found disturbing evidence that several potential witnesses had died under extremely suspicious circumstances. Dr. Mordecai Blackwood had died in an automobile accident in 1903, barely a year after the institution's closure. His brother Cornelius had been found dead in his library, apparently from natural causes that were never investigated. FBI archives contain specific references to periodic investigations about the experiments during the 1920s, 1940s, and 1960s. Each time evidence or testimonies emerged, they were quickly suppressed under justification of critical national security. An FBI report dated 1947 described the discovery of documents related to the experiments. Documents have been recovered that could gravely compromise current national security operations. We recommend permanent classification and immediate destruction of physical evidence. Sarah realized the photograph she had found had survived only because it had been kept in private family archives, completely outside the reach of systematic government purges. The investigation revealed that the cover-up had continued until very recent times. In the 1970s, when public investigations about government mind control experiments began, archives related to the 1898 experiments had been reclassified as top secret with permanent restricted access. A Department of Justice document dated 1978 admitted the existence of the experiments, but recommended maintaining absolute secrecy. While we recognize that significant irregularities were committed in the psychological research program of 1896-1900, public revelation could compromise current intelligence operations and create massive legal liability. Sarah understood she had discovered not just a historical crime, but evidence of an active cover-up that had continued for more than 120 years. The 4 children in the photograph had been victims not only of the original experiments, but of decades of systematic denial and deliberate suppression of the truth about their fate. The vacant smiles of the children in the photograph had been accidentally preserved as the only surviving testimony of one of the darkest and most prolonged secrets of the American government. It was October 28, 2024. Sarah had made the most difficult decision of her career, to make the story of the 1898 mind control experiments public. She knew she would face powerful opposition from multiple institutions, but felt she owed it morally to Thomas, Elizabeth, Samuel, and Mary. She contacted David Harrison, investigative journalist for the Boston Globe, specializing in government secrets. David had exposed several important historical cover-ups and completely understood the importance of revealing hidden truths regardless of consequences. "Sarah, this is more explosive than you can imagine," said David, after meticulously reviewing all the documentation. "We're not just talking about brutal experiments on children, but documented origins of mind control programs that continued for decades." Sarah spent entire days obsessively verifying every document, every photograph, every testimony. The evidence was absolutely irrefutable. Family archives from descendants of institution employees had provided additional testimonies that confirmed all the documented horrors. On October 31, 2024, the Boston Globe published the complete investigation on the front page. The Lost Children of Salem, Government Mind Control Experiments Revealed by 1898 Photograph. The image of the 4 children with their vacant eyes prominently accompanied the article. The reaction was immediate, intense, and polarized. The Department of Justice issued a statement denying specific knowledge of the experiments, but the documentary evidence was too solid to be ignored or discredited. Congresspeople from both parties demanded immediate investigations. Sarah received serious anonymous threats, but also received massive support from human rights activists, survivors of subsequent experiments, and descendants of other program victims who began to come forward publicly. Most emotional was when Sarah was contacted by Margaret Whitmore, Thomas's great-granddaughter. At 45, Margaret had grown up with fragmented family stories about a great-great-grandfather who had mysteriously disappeared in a Salem orphanage. "Dr. Mitchell, my family always knew something terrible had happened to Thomas," Margaret told her with a broken voice. "But we never imagined he had been used as a human guinea pig. Seeing his photograph, his completely vacant eyes, is absolutely devastating. But it's also a profound relief to finally know the truth." It was November 15, 2024. Sarah stood in Salem's Greenlawn Cemetery, where a commemorative monument had been erected for Thomas, Elizabeth, Samuel, and Mary. Their bodies were never found, but their names were now permanently engraved in stone. The inscription was simple, but infinitely powerful: Thomas Whitmore, Elizabeth Hayes, Samuel Porter, Mary Campbell. Innocent victims of government experiments, 1898. May their sacrifices never be forgotten. Sarah had brought the original photograph, carefully framed. She placed it gently next to the monument, observing how the children's faces seemed more peaceful now that their story had finally been told to the entire world. "They're no longer alone," she whispered with tears in her eyes. "The whole world knows their truth." Margaret Whitmore was there along with descendants of the other children who had been identified through the massive investigation. These children were stolen from their families, systematically stripped of their humanity, and finally murdered, said Margaret with a firm voice. But their photograph waited patiently for 126 years to reveal the truth. That's a profound kind of justice. Congress had passed a formal resolution asking for official apologies to victims of the 1898-1900 mind control experiments. A significant reparations fund was established for descendants of identified victims. The Salem Local History Museum had created a permanent exhibition titled "The Lost Children Psychological Experiments and the Fight for Truth." The photograph of the 4 children occupied a central place alongside declassified documents and family testimonies. Sarah had received contacts from researchers worldwide inspired by her discovery. Similar institutions had been identified in other countries, revealing that the experiments had been part of an international network of psychological research. The photograph had demonstrated that even the darkest and best-kept secrets can be revealed by the smallest and most unexpected details. The vacant eyes of 4 children had waited more than a century to tell their story and had finally found a voice that resonated throughout the world. The impact was transformative. Universities began teaching about the experiments as part of courses on medical ethics. Human rights organizations used the story to press for greater transparency in current government research. As she walked away from the cemetery, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary power of images to preserve truths that transcend time and death. The 1898 photograph hadn't just been documentation of a crime. It had been a silent testimony, patiently waiting for the right moment to reveal one of the darkest pages in American history. The 4 children of Salem had finally found the peace they deserved, and their sacrifice had served to protect future generations from similar experiments. Their memory, accidentally preserved in a family photograph, had transcended death to become a permanent call for ethical vigilance and absolute government transparency. Thomas, Elizabeth, Samuel, and Mary had been silenced in life, but their image had screamed the truth for 126 years, waiting for someone to finally hear their story and tell it to the world. Justice had come late, but it had come complete and definitive.